Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the 2020 Cinema Arts Festival. And I am so overjoyed to be making this introduction. You all are in for a treat. I know you just had, an incredible experience watching Mogul Mowgli, which is an amazing film. Mogul Mowgli is a film that I first saw at the Berlin Film Festival back in February. I fell in love with it immediately. I knew we had to have it. I knew we wanted it for opening night, and we got it. The director is brilliant and no joke and incredible. Bassam Tariq, he is from Houston. We are so excited that this is our opening night film, and I hope you enjoyed the film as much as I do. We are also so excited because we have an extra treat. We have Bassam Tariq in conversation with the one and only Bun B of UGK and a Houston Cinema Arts Society board member. So these are like two of the most brilliant, lovely people I've ever met in my life. I am so overjoyed. They're going to be talking about, this incredible film. I usually like to do this myself, and moderate these conversations, but I am ceding the stage because I know this is in the best possible hands. Bundy is such an incredible moderator and literally one of the most favorite people that I've met in my life. So we're so overjoyed you had this conversation. Without further ado, I am going to cede the stage to the wonderful Bundy and Bassam Tariq. Yay! Hey! Let's get the show on the road.
I don't know how to follow that intro, Bassam. That was very high praise Jessica bestowed on me. How are you today, my friend?
I'm good, man. I mean, I'm also just I got this big smile on my face, man. I was like, so it's such an honor to be sitting. I wish we were sitting across each other, but even in this digital stage, to be here with you is really, really an honor.
Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for allowing us to present your film on opening night. We're in Houston. Obviously, we claim you as our own, and we're so proud of you and your work. And as Jessica said, she was very adamant in trying to secure this for opening night. I know it took a little while to maneuver, but we did get it worked out. Thank you so much for allowing us to show your film. Where did the initial idea for Mogul Mowgli come from?
Man, so it kind of started when Riz and I became friends in New York City. I was working at a butchery. I own a butchery over there, so I was working there, and the first film I made was a documentary. And my co-director became good friends with Riz, and he was like, "Hey, you got to meet this actor Riz." And I'd seen Four Lions, and he was shooting this series called The Night Of at the time, so 2014, 2015. And the first time we meet him, he actually comes to my butchery, and right away, we just started to just get along, and I realized that my working class background and his working class background were very, very similar. And I think generally with Asians and a lot of us when we usually kind of make it, it's usually people that are well to do or people that come from wealthier backgrounds. So then we had this little bit of guilt. I know he had it and I did too, this kind of survivor's guilt. I don't know if you ever feel it, where you kind of made it out of something.
So I know exactly what you mean. What you mean.
Yeah, so I think that kind of connected us a bit, and we just stayed connected for a long time, and we just wanted to figure out a way to work together. And I think what it came down was this feeling of becoming irrelevant, or that there can only be one of us, that can make it. There can only be that one brown artist. And then there's also this element of cultural performance that we do in these places. I don't know if you ever do this, Bundy, but I feel sometimes I come out to these events and I have to represent all these different communities. But am I even really a part of those communities? You know what I mean? Am I, just because I'm rapping it doesn't mean that I even want to be seen around those people, right? That's always a bigger question that I have is so that kind of, that burden of representation, also the guilt around it. But then also then there's the element of the father and son thing that I think we both also felt a close connection to. So that was kind of the germination and the themes that we were wrestling with.
I think it's amazing that you not only were able to connect with someone who, as an actor, could pull off the emotional weight of this role. This was not an easy role to commit to, but also someone that has a frame of reference for the rapping. How, how lucky were you as a director to have Riz who could give you both? I mean, he's an accomplished recording artist as well as an accomplished actor. I mean, he's working the Night Of, which is, brilliant. Nightcrawler, brilliant. How lucky did you feel the fact that you were able to create a movie that ideologically you and the lead actor agreed on, and then two, to create this kind of a story? Because it would have been very easy, I feel, for a movie like this to fall into an 8 Mile scenario, right? And so I could almost imagine from a creative standpoint, you guys are doing everything you can, right, for this movie to not come across as some kind of Indian Packy
Yeah,
version of a mile, you know?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, man, that was a real challenge. But also, I just have to say that Riz is a huge fan as well. He sends his regards. He's right now on a shoot, but like when I'm gonna take a snapshot of us and I'm gonna send it to him in a minute. But and I think it's like it was really a gift working with Riz, because he's somebody that I've always felt just watching him perform and just hanging out with him. It's like we haven't seen his potential yet. And I feel like one thing that I've seen as a director is like my job is to empower the people around me to bring their best. So in a way, we had like a very little time to like rehearse. But in some ways, he was rehearsing for this role for 2 years since we started working and kind of coming up with what this character and what this world was going to be. And also, man, like we come from like the tradition of like Asian Central Asian art or Muslim or Islamic art, which is what I kind of like connect myself more with than like this Pakistani or Indian thing, which I feel like somebody's put me in a box of. But I've chosen to be a Muslim, and then I look at those values as a way that connects me to a larger framework and a beautiful framework of understanding of the world, which then allows me to take something from Morocco. I can take from Rumi, or I can take from this and that. So then, it's a really trippy culture, man. Like from the start, it's always been a really tripped out stories. So we want to build, we want to take from those stories, and let's bring that kind of trippiness into cinema, right? Because cinema is such a young art form, right? It's so young. So why are we to say what it is right now? Like it's not. It's only been 100 years, I think, this year or a few years ago. So I feel like there's still so much we can learn and we can grow and build on. It's not like painting or whatever, right? It's something really exciting. So let's go see what we can contribute in it.
Amazing, amazing. Let's talk about the room. Let's talk about Zaire or Zed, as the character is called. We see him. Obviously, he starts off with this. I mean, this shot, which kind of seems like he's by himself, alone in thought and reflection, but it's actually him getting ready. Like that's kind of his show intro. First of all, I feel like this film hits all the right notes from a performance aspect, right? A guy like Riz, young, excited, who's very representative of his culture, wants to be taken seriously, but then also comes from this battle rap scenario, right? Would be as aggressive as physical as Riz portrays it in this film. Was it important for you to set up this level of physicality in terms of the story dynamic? Because we would see in Act Two where that would be the thing that he would start to lose, would be his strength and his physicality.
Yes, man. Yes, I'm so happy that I've never been asked that before, but I think it's interesting that you, as somebody that is a hip hop performer, as somebody that's that has this understanding. Like I was also so curious to see how you would view the film. So it's the first time I've ever been asked that actually, and I think and that was something that was very important to us. And I think something to also just mention about like the reason why we made him a rapper. I was like, in my mind, it's like he's either got to be a boxer or a rapper because
Mm,
the language of hip hop or the language of boxing are those two things where you can almost be taken and equal around the world, right? Like because boxing is about like in this ring, I'm an equal, right? Doesn't matter who I am, where I come from, you're gonna take me serious in these rounds, right? You could be Khabib,
right.
who's laughed at by the rest of the world, but get in the ring with him, right? And then you'll see what the deal is. Or with the
Okay.
same thing with like Muhammad Ali, right? It just goes on and on. So just like that with rap and rap battles, and also the language of resistance that hip hop stands for, right? And I think like there are two things I'd like to say about that. The physicality was deeply important, and we actually brought in a movement director named Polly Bennett who did the movement of Rami Malek in Bohemian Rhapsody,
Oh
and
wow.
she helped with build out this like language of movement. And the thing for me, man, that I've always felt with a lot of hip hop acts is that like at least in the Asian space, right? Like we're really insecure about being hip hop artists because we know I'm not a hip hop artist, but like I can see from the communities that it is a black art form and it needs to be respected in some capacity. That this is a black art form that we are stepping into and learning from, and we're contributing in some capacity, but it also needs to be respected. So there's always that level of I think imposter syndrome that comes into it. So I think it was an important thing of like how do we make this like something that we can take and learn from and grow from, but also honor what it means, and then and then also complicate that space, right? Because there's also this other conversation, and forgive me if I'm like taking this another place, but I just think it's important
No,
to
no, go for it.
mention. is that like a lot of some people have talked about this, but a lot of Asian artists that have ever made it out in Hollywood is through the performance of blackness, right? It's a few artists that have done that. Even Riz talks about it as well, like even his own act. Heems is his rapping partner. I mean, Sweatshop Boys talks about it very openly that like that this is something that Aquafina, right? There are a few other people that have come out in this using our black art. And that's a like I'm not saying it's a bad thing or whatever, but it's a complicated issue. And I think that the complexity of it needs to be talked about. And what does that mean? And how do you at least honor the languages of resistance that you felt comfortable connecting with, right? Because that's always, even for me, like, forgive me the last thing I'm going to say about this, is that like I've found like whenever I've looked to take any creative risks in my life, I've looked at people of color, I've looked at Black people, I've looked at Native Americans, right? Like I've looked at Tommy Orange's there when I see like, oh my God, what you can do with a novel. I look at Teju Cole as a writer. I look to Kendrick Lamar. I look to these people that have broken form, done interesting things, and I look at them to ask for permission almost. You know what I mean? In a weird way.
No,
I don't know if you feel that. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you mean in terms of trying to maintain the integrity of not only of the film but of the art form itself. You don't want it to come across as mimicry, right? You definitely don't want it to come across as mockery. You don't want to try to play into any stereotypes, right? And at the same time, you still want to give an authentic, unique vocal performance, right? So it's like you're navigating all of these things, and then, oh yeah, and the rhyme has to actually be good too, right? So I'm seeing all the different nuances that are happening in the moment. I'm like, look, I'm like, he's obviously acting, right? There's obviously marks that he has to hit in terms of lighting and all of this stuff, right? But at the end of the day, like he has to nail the rhyme, right? And I love, and for me as a black man, because I don't really necessarily have this point, this same entry point, I guess, in terms of the Asian perspective, the Central Asian perspective, or the Muslim perspective when it comes to hip hop. I mean, outside of like 5%, right? But yeah, it was very interesting for me as an artist because I get all the rap stuff, but then it's all kind of wrapped up tightly, neatly with this other cultural aspects of it, right? So you have to make sure that you're doing rap as a culture, honorably. You got to make sure you get that. But then there's all these other cultural nuances that you're tying into the movie as well. I mean, and it's for me, it's like it's education, right? Because I don't understand the family dynamic. I thought it was interesting to see. I mean, we always talk about the father and the son, right? But in different cultures, the dynamic is different, right? And I noticed that the father was still he still treated Zed like a son, like a boy, right? Throughout the film, he was still his little boy, the whole time. And I don't know if that's cultural or specific to that character, right? And those are the kind of things that I'm wrestling with as I'm watching it. But it all feels authentic. It all feels very sincere. Mom is acting like a mom would act. Dad is acting like a dad would act. And then there's always that figure, that cousin or brother figure that's like, you just don't take things serious enough. You're not looking at this the right way. I think you guys hit all the right notes on this film, man. It really, really was amazing. I want to talk about RPG, right? And the dynamic with RPG and Zed, because this happens, I guess, all across, not just from a musical standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint, in terms of people trying to represent their culture and their art in a certain way, and they feel that other people are not representing it the right way. And then when RPG kind of comes to the hospital and he's like, "We're the same guy, right?" I know what he means. I think we all know what he means, but that type of person, really doesn't know how to elocute that the right way, right? He's talking about Oprah and these other people like to say, take them to their dad. Now, I got what he was saying, but it seemed like it was very hard for Zed to embrace that idea. Even though as true and honest as it was, it seemed very hard for him to embrace that, knowing that not only was the door opening for RPG, but he wasn't necessarily like a mentee or a person that gets to benefit from the rewards of Zed. He actually gets to benefit from the fact that Zed can't do it anymore. That's got to be a really rough pill to swallow,
Yeah.
No, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, what did you think of that, man? Like, I'm so curious to know. Like,
Well, and again, it's something that it's everywhere, right? Like especially with hip hop, right? There's this idea that black culture or black representation or black culture has to be represented a certain way. There's a certain way we should do this, right? And so we make all the room in the world for, like you talk about, like a Kendrick Lamar or J. Cole, or people like that, right? People with higher levels of consciousness who can better speak to the conditions. And there's always hindrance when the Gucci man to certain people who is just as enjoyable
yeah,
and art, right? But doesn't have the same perspective. And there's always this. I know from the outside looking in that people feel like we don't all like hang with each other, which is not true. Like we all do Rolling Loud and we all do these different music festivals and we see each other all the time. But it always seems like we're speaking to and coming from these totally opposite places within black culture. But the reality is, and I think this is what RPG was trying to say is, look, we it takes all of us to represent this, right? Like, being Asian is not just how you see being Asian, it's not just how I see it, right? Because there's just as many people who identify with you as there are that identify with me. And it's representative of the culture as a mass. And I think it's amazing that you were able to create that conversation within that moment with a person who really doesn't even know what he's trying to say. Like he gets it and he feels it, right? Yeah. It's like, look, we're both Asian, we're both representing the same thing. You're Muslim, I'm Muslim. We're both speaking to I just speak from a different aspect. And within hip hop, there's the idea, not so much from the artist, but mainly from the consumers, right? That this rap is better than that rap. When it's really, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. As an older artist, I get looked at. People expect me to shit on the younger, wilder kids with the face tattoos and the dreadlocks and all of that. And I'm like, no, because they're young. We're in a different place. We might be older. We might be sure. We may have different life experiences that have us where we are. And I think that's kind of where Zed is, right? I think Zed has and you see it in the flashbacks, right? Because there are different things of Zed's childhood that continue to haunt him. And he's been battling with this identity and this idea of who he is and how he should present himself to the world. And he tries to do it through the music, right? He's not doing it very well in real time, right? Like, he doesn't see his parents as much. He doesn't go back to where he grew up from as much. But his music is very representative of a person who is extremely proud of who he is. He takes a lot of pride in who he is. And like his manager, she was trying to say, like, it's crazy that you say all this. When was the last time you went home, Mr. Pride, Mr. Proud? I'm paraphrasing, obviously. But I mean, and this is something that exists, right? I feel like when a white rapper decides to rap, right? Like how much of black culture can he put into what he's doing to the point where does he lose his whiteness, right? And is there fear of becoming a wigger? And I get the sense of from Zed's aspect, it's like, look, if you keep doing all this, and to him it's clown shit, right? Like I hear it all the time from different rappers, like this dude is a clown, this dude doesn't respect the art and all of that. Yet the people connect to it, right? And you're never going to blame the audience because once you start blaming the consumer base, then they turn on you. Like, don't tell us we're stupid. Don't tell us what to like. Maybe we like him and we like you. I listen to different music for different things. There's gospel music and then there's dance music. But I was like, this is amazing that inside of all of this, like all the confrontations and all the back and forth inside of hip hop culturally, you guys nailed it, right? But then like that first dinner when Zed comes home and they're talking about you should be proud of your name, all of this Zed stuff. I get that. I get that totally because I'm from the South and my parents are from Louisiana. And I'm sorry, I'm doing too much talking. I'm supposed to be interviewing
no,
you.
No. I want to hear this, so please continue. Tell me.
But it's this whole idea of keeping in touch with your roots, keeping in touch with your identity, the legacy of your family, and how much does our jobs or the communities that we live in and the jobs that we work at and the people we mix with, how much of that takes us away from our true identities, right? And so I think it's an amazing thing that the guy that should understand, right, doesn't, and the guy that shouldn't understand gets it.
Yeah, yeah. Man, you put it better than I. The only thing I want to add on that is I watched an interview that J. Cole did with, I think it was Lil Pump or one of those like kind of Danny rappers. And it was Napan Rizwan, who's the actor that plays RPG. He made me watch it because he was like, "Yo, look, like we could do." Because the thing of RPG is, I made the character of RPG with the actor. We sat together, and he himself is like a rising MC. He's trying to like, he's doing his own thing. It's kind of cool. So he basically went into the studio, recorded a few tracks. Like one was like Molly Pop Lady, and then this was Pussy Fried Chicken.
Oh, Pussy Fried Chicken is the greatest song title of all time. And I got it. Like you instantly get it. Like the title and the way he's saying it, and kind of like the way and then the camera like pans out, and you eventually see the girl shaking her ass. I'm like, okay, I know where we're going with this. This is the antithesis of what Zed kind of represents, right?
Yeah.
No, you guys killed it.
Oh, thank you. But the funny thing is, man, he's still like he's also representing something of the Asian culture because the chicken shop is like what you make fun of Asians for. Like everyone owns a chicken shop. You know what I mean? And you go and like all the chicken shops are halal and this and that. So it's like, so in a way we were kind of using our own reference point of like Asian cultures and all that. And it's also funny because like the other thing that I wanted to mention was that Naban, the actor, brought so much heart into the role that we wanted to just push it as much as we could. So and I'm happy that it came through that he's like slipping over his words and he's trying to figure out how to say all this stuff.
Amazing.
Because it's an important thing where it's like when I watched the interview that J. Cole did with this guy, I was like, oh my god, this guy's humanizing this kid that's gone through so much craziness in his life. So it's like it really gave me that moment of like, man, this is like it made me respect J. Cole more. And it also made me realize that like what I don't want to be, and this is a question I have to ask you, is how do you not become a bitter artist as you get older, right? And like how do you continue to have the compassion to give? Because I sometimes feel like already like I'm in my mid 30s now, and already like I'm not producing the amount of work that I used to, and I'm feeling like, oh man, how am I going to keep up with the younger cats? And there's amazing work coming out that inspires me from younger people, but I don't know if I'll be able to keep up, and I'm always afraid I might become bitter because I may not understand. So that's my question to you: is like how do you deal with that?
You have to constantly remind yourself that you're that kid. Like when I see these young guys come up and I look at them and I see what they're fighting against, you have to consider the fact that the man I am now is not the man I was then, right? Like we talking about voting and all of that stuff, and I'm not going to get political, but people ask me like, when did you start voting? I'm like, I didn't start voting until my kids were in high school, and like my priorities had to shift, right? Because when I was my own person and I was only responsible for me, I didn't really care about anything. I was like, as long as I'm good, I wake up in the morning, I won, and then it's just kind of what it is. But you have to look and realize, like for example, I remember when guys like Soldier Boy first came out, people were very, very anti Soldier Boy and what he stood for. And I'm like, look, he's a kid. He's trying to figure this out. It takes a while to figure it out. And yeah, we could always, look, I'm 47 years old. I've been through so much. I've seen and experienced so much, right? And it'd be easy for me to just kind of sit up on this pedestal and just shit at these young guys. But I have an amazing life due to being able by people to do what I love for a living, right? There were people who facilitated this for me. There were people who mentored this for me. So I didn't just get here like on my own accord, right? There was a lot of help that got me to where I am. And not just professionally, right? But as a human being, there's a lot of things that I had to go through, and a lot of people who helped me kind of find my way into who it was that I eventually became. And so my thing is, I look at these guys, and as bad as they are, some of them, I was a bad guy when I was young. I did the wrong drugs. I hung out with the wrong people. I did the wrong things consistently, and I was able to kind of grow up and grow out of that, right? And it's only because there were people in my life who didn't give up on me, right? So my wish is that for young guys to come in, for them to be able to capitalize off of their art, because so many artists created greatness in this world and they didn't see the financial benefit of it, right? And yeah, the next generation is going to make a lot more money than me and be a lot more famous than me. But that's how it was with me in terms of the generation before me. Like I made more money than the guys that paved the way for me. I gained more notoriety than the guys that paved the way for me. And so I have to constantly remind myself that I was these kids. You know what I'm saying? And then and the other thing is I have my wife is amazing in the sense of keeping me centered, right? So I'm probably famous everywhere except within these walls in this house. You know what I'm saying? So my wife does a really good job of keeping me centered, making sure that I keep my eyes on the prize, staying prioritized, not letting me get the big head and that kind of stuff, because that can happen very easily in this industry. But I think if you remember where you were and you remember how you were, it's easier for you to see where these guys can go, right? Because it'd be easy for me to be like, oh, this dude can't rap, it's trash, or whatever. You know what I'm saying? There were a lot of people who thought I was trash when I first started, and I eventually and I can go back and listen to some of my early music and be like, oh no, this was terrible. This was not the best thing in the world. But I cared about it more. I had different life experiences that allowed me to interject different things into my music. I became a well-rounded person, and because of that, my music became more well-rounded. I had an expanded worldview. So did my music. So all of these things that I went through in life reflected in the music that I created. So a lot of these young guys, they just haven't seen enough of it. They haven't experienced enough of it. You give them time, and they all come around. You know.
That's amazing, man. Like because like a few things that you're saying that I want to just reflect back at you is like people like looking back at the helpers that helped you and knowing that like that love that you had in your life is what kept you going. I think that's something that is really important to keep in mind. Relationships, right? Like because that's what it really comes down to. And I also noticed was gratitude. Like everything that you were saying was about like it's about having gratitude and making sure that you continue to have that because then you understand that like I've been blessed with something and I know maybe perhaps the next generation may have more than me. And that's a good thing, right? Because that's something that like we were battling with the whole film, right? In the end, we're like the guy basically takes the song, right? These people are watching to have the film and you hear it while you're taking the shit. And it's like and your dad's outside. It's just like the worst possible thing. Your mom puts the song up because oh great, that's like my son's song. It's like oh god, And then it's like okay, let's make the best out of a shitty situation, right? So it's kind of one of those moments that I felt like
It's one of those things where I've realized now that at some point in your life, someone or maybe one person and maybe several people will love you in a moment more than you love yourself, right? And that's how they kind of pull you through. And you see it in this film. You see Zed getting very low, starting to give up on himself physically, artistically, all of these things. But his dad never gives up on him.
wow, yeah,
And that's what happens in that moment when Zed starts to you start to feel sorry for yourself and start to throw a pity party. At some point, someone's got to come to you and tell you, no, I won't allow you to do this because I love you too much to let you give up. And that's a very real thing. And I think we all go through that at some point, and it's a matter of embracing it. And a lot of times it's hard for us to embrace it because the person that we love is telling us that, hey, you may never be who it is you're trying to be in life. Right. And I think that's what Zed's dad is trying to get through to him is like, look, yeah, you had dreams. We all had dreams, we all had dreams. And, just because we don't get there doesn't mean life isn't still worth living. Right.
Yeah.
And I think your movie does a really, really good job of showing someone who kind of had it all, lost it, and is in this fight to figure out if they want to give up on themselves or
not. Oh man, that's fuck, man. It's crazy being in Houston talking about this stuff because so much of this is based on my family too. We're like, we've owned many businesses that have failed, right? Like we owned the Sally Beauty Hair Salon. You know what I mean? Like we tried all these things to try to get off the ground, and it never really worked. So when I ran out of Houston, it was like I want to become somebody. You know what I mean? I'm not coming back, right? And then like something then brings you back, and the last thing you want is the person that you feel like you you're running away from becoming instead of telling you the truth. That's not the person you
Right.
want to hear. That's the last person you want to hear it from. So
Yeah, you don't want people to. You want people to say, "Hey, man, you're doing it. You're better than I ever could have been." You don't want them. You don't want to come to realization like, "Well, look, you didn't make it, but I didn't either. Why don't you come back and work with me?" You gave it a shot. I gave it a shot. It didn't work. This is just where we are. You know. No, but I mean, I love this film, man. I really, because if you look at this film in terms of identity, for me, I look at identity, right? Because he's trying to see if he wants rap to define him or if he wants his family and his cultural identity to define him. So he's having that fight, and then the idea of being that close to what you've wanted all your life, like to be that close, and then have it kind of taken away from you, right? In a way that you don't. The fucked up thing is there's no one to blame. I feel like, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no one to blame for what's happening to him in his life in that moment. It just is.
Yeah.
How do you come to terms with that when there's no bad guy?
Yeah, that's like the pandemic, isn't it? Right, where it's like I think all of us had plans, and everything's been just so changed. I think when Jessica, we saw a film in Berlin, I was like, oh cool, like this is it. Like everyone's like, yeah, some things are about to change for you. I'm back at I'm living at my parents. Like I'm near my parents. It's a wild, crazy thing that I never expected. So in a way, I'm kind of like I told Riz on the phone the other day. It's like I feel like I'm living the film again.
Yeah, no, I know, right? In real time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you go home and you talk to your parents about everything you had plans, but guys, the film was going to drop and we were going to go around and do all these film festivals. And mom and dad, and you know what, they're okay, right? They don't look at you any less. If anything, they love you more in that moment.
Yeah, yeah, they're happy that I'm around, right? Like
which is all that parents want, right? That's all parents really want at the piece is to make sure that you're okay, come around and see us, Did you consider a soundtrack for this? Did you guys consider a commercial release for this music? Like, was that ever anything that you guys were considering? Because I feel like there's at least an EP, right?
So Riz has been working on a separate, he released a recent track with it, kind of based on his inspiration from the character and stuff. I'll send it over to you. It's called Once Kings, and it's quite nice, man. It's quite nice, and he made a few other tracks, and I think maybe like with the U.S. release we may in March. Looks like we're looking at a possible U.S. release. So I think we may put something together. But yeah, I mean, if you have whatever. I'd love to know what you were thinking of the music in the film and the lyrics as well. I'd love to know your thoughts on it and what you thought the arc was and all that. Just.
No, I thought it was it was really good because it goes deeper than the fact that he's just a rapper, right? Because he could have done very surface level music, right? Could have been just very easily for people to embrace, kind of party records or whatever. But his music is it's very aggressive, right? And I didn't really understand that until the battle rap scenario comes up. I'm like, oh, okay, he's a battle rapper. That's why he comes across like that, right? Like it all makes sense if you understand music culturally, if you understand hip hop culturally, right? But I thought it was also very, especially so to me, there's the music that he's rapping to the audience, like in the concert setting, and then there's these other ones like when he's at home laying in the bed or whatever. Like I don't, because it's still aggressive in nature. I don't know if he's saying it because he's mad at the world or mad at himself, right? In that moment, because as an artist, sometimes you do that, right? When there's no, when you don't have anyone to point the finger at, sometimes you end up having to point the finger at yourself, and it's a lot of it is about, a lot of his lyrics are about pride, identity, and, where I'm from, I rep where I'm from, which is a big part of what hip hop is, right? Like making sure you represent where you're from. But then there's also the idea of once you make it and you go out in the world, like I'm from Texas, you make it big in here and you're expected to be in New York or LA, right? So you got famous because of the pride that you have from where you're from, but then you're almost never there. Like Drake says, right? I'm hardly home but always repping.
Yeah.
And so I felt like there was this whole battle like within Zed to try to figure out like, how do I present this without, being an imposter, right? Without being fake, and I feel like this trip home kind of brings it all together for him, right? It puts him in the perfect place that he needs to be to go out and actually be the person he's been presenting himself as, but now he can't go out at all, right? Like he can't get on stage. It's crazy when you get to that level of clarity and you're not allowed to really apply it in the way that you would like to apply it. I thought it was brilliant, you know what I'm saying, from a storytelling aspect. That he was so good at representing where he was from. Then but he's always kind of avoiding going back to where you're from because you don't want it to mean you're going backwards, right? Like going home, going home can seem like going backwards, right? When you're a grown man and you kind of have to, you go back home to see your parents and you go back sleeping in the bedroom that you slept in when you were a kid and you almost regress as soon as you hit the door, right?
Yeah.
Like you don't want to act too grown in front of your parents, right? I remember the first time I like actively cursed in front of my mom and she didn't get mad. Like I caught myself cursing and I was like waiting for her to say something. She didn't say nothing. So I kind of like cursed again. She didn't say anything. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. You're a grown ass man. Like you actually get paid to curse for a living, and I see Zed fighting against that, because he wants to be the good son to the parents, right? But then he's getting called out, like, but you're Mr. Big Man now. You know what I'm saying? You want to be Zed now. Your name is Zaire. You should be proud of that, right? There's always that aspect of, yeah, you're doing good for yourself, but you're letting go of this, and this is how we know you, right? And we love you for this. They love you for that. They'll never forget the people that love you for Zaire. You know what I'm saying? We're different from the people that love Zed,
Yeah. And they gave you that name, man. That was one of my favorite lines in it. Where
exactly.
Yeah, because it's a thing, man, right? It's like the lines that were drawn for our people, right? Like it's just ridiculous, and then we kind of take on these identities that other people gave to us, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's something that it's tough to know how to navigate these spaces sometimes because and I guess like because I think we have to maybe wrap soon and Bunby, thank you for this, but I have a question that I would love to ask you as like how have you navigated that where people have maybe tried to put you in a box or tokenize you as like, oh well, you're this kind of a rapper or you're this kind of an academic or whatever, like how have you navigated the boxes that people try to put you in?
I've tried to make sure that people who are inside hip hop culture do not try to make me present myself in the way that they would like me to, and vice versa for people who I know outside of the culture, right? So I'm not gonna let hip hop dumb me down, right? That's been a big thing, right? I've worked to make sure that I don't allow hip hop to dumb me down, right? And what happens is a lot of entertainers, I won't say most, but a lot of entertainers present themselves in a way that they would like to be seen, right? It's not necessarily who they are, but this is the way they would like the world to see them and address them and embrace them as. And so what happens is that doesn't always fall into sync with who you really are. So you'll go out of your way to consistently put yourself in positions that allow you to present yourself in the way you want to, as opposed to the way that you are. So that's why guys stop going to family reunions, stop going back home to visit old friends because they don't know this new person that you want to be known as. You know? And then at the same time, you have to also let people know that, yeah, I am from here, I love you guys, whatever, but I've also grown. Right? So yeah, we did grow up together. Yeah, you and I, we used to sleep in the bed when we were kids and we used to run here and steal fruit out of this tree and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, that's a part of who I am, but that isn't solely who I am anymore. And I can't allow you to lock me into who I used to be, right? Because that benefits you. Because there's a lot of people that I've had around in my life who probably feel they deserve more of my life than they do, right? the people that were there before you made it or whatever,
Mhm.
right, want to constantly remind you of who you were, right? And I can't let you box me in like that because I've grown, I've progressed, and I'm not solely that anymore, right? And there's a part of my life that demands I do different things to be around other people. It doesn't mean I've turned my back on you, but this part of my life demands more of me than that part does. When I was a kid, I didn't know everything. Yeah, I did. I felt the need to be around people more often, to have people around me because I was scared to learn new things, and I didn't want to be by myself when changes started to happen. Right? I'm not that kid anymore. I'm a big boy now. You know what I'm saying? I don't need you to hold my hand when we walk home after, the scary movie on Halloween weekend or whatever. It's just a matter of being content enough with yourself to know that only you get to dictate who you are in this world. And you know what? Here's my last question, Bassam.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, how do you describe this film? Like, it's not a typical drama, right? And there's a lot of things visually that lend themselves almost to like horror, right? Like these panic dreams that he has and these flashbacks. They're very very intense, right? So it reminds me a lot of like Jacob's Ladder and stuff like that. It's very trippy, right?
Yeah.
It's very trippy. Even when they're doing the cupping, like you made cupping seem like super dangerous. And I've done cupping before. My wife and I have done cupping before.
I love
I'm like,
cupping.
wow. Like,
Cupping's changed my life. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
but I mean, just the way you made this film it was very like in your face, right? Almost very claustrophobic,
Yeah.
right? A lot of these scenes with Zaire's character felt very claustrophobic, like the world was kind of bearing down on it. But a lot of those shots are usually restricted to horror films and thrillers or supernatural films like that. How do you define this film? And I think we got to shut it down now.
Man, yeah, Bumby, that's a great question, man, and I think that's something that I've always had a hard time kind of. It's like how people describe me sometimes, like, oh, Pakistani American director, right? Or they say I'm like Houston native. It's like, well, I was raised in Queens, and then I was in A-Leaf for a few years, and then I moved to the Burbs for a few years, and I left. So am I here? Am I from there? Like, I don't know if you feel the same. So it's like I feel like it's a constant struggle that I have of like I want to use a lot of words to explain things, but I know that's never helpful, right?
Right.
So I think for me, man, the way I've tried to look at this film is like an exercise for me on how can I leave something for my kids, and I've got two boys, and how can I leave something for them and for people, young artists of color, like that are looking to trip up and make mistakes. Like, here's a roadmap, right? Here's a way that you can continue to trip up, right? Go make some mistakes. Go make some good mistakes. Fail forward, because that's what I think we need more of, right? I don't want to see more like polemical agitprop of like how cool it is to be an immigrant and this and that. Like, yeah, we know it, right? We live it, whatever. It's tough, So like, give me like let's go talk about the vulnerabilities. Let's use the language of cinema. Like, what can we do that's different and expanded? But so for me, I'm sorry, I'm not even like answering your question, but in a way, it's like it's like I think the way Riz explained it is really funny. He calls it a Sufi horror musical. So
Yeah.
so it's like, yeah.
I get that. Look, even if we can't come up with a way to define it, this film does a great job of speaking for itself. It's an amazing work. You guys did an amazing job. Thank you so much for allowing us to show it on opening night. Thank you for this conversation. And man, keep up the good work. Keep up the good work.
Oh, thanks a lot, man.